All right, let's talk about the Minnesota Vikings and the Green Bay Packers. This game in Lambeau, last time we saw these two face off, it was one of the highest scoring games we've seen on the season. Do you think this will be another barn burner here? The Vikings obviously look like they're kind of punting their defense away. They continue to deal with more injuries with Danielle Hunter going down for the season. It's going to be a very, very fun game offensively. Obviously, the Packers had taken a step back when they played the Buccaneers in Week 6, but they rebounded and went right back to their high-powered offensive ways, facing the Texans last week. Don't expect there to be much resistance here from the Vikings in this one, which makes sense why there is a 52.5-point over-under from Vegas. Packers favored to win this one by 6.5 points. That's not something that we would have expected to see coming into the season, but hey, Packers are playing a lot better ball than the Vikings at this point. The Vikings defense has been a defense to exploit for fantasy purposes, giving up the 7th most points to quarterbacks, the 3rd most points to receivers, pretty average against running backs and tight ends, whereas the Packers have given up the most points on average to running backs across the NFL. Now, receivers defense with Jair Alexander becoming one of the true shutdown corners in the game has been a bit of a concern for opposing fantasy receivers. Now, obviously, Jair Alexander was healthy in Week 1, and we saw Adam Thielen go off. I do know that he typically stays on the outside, so I don't really know if I can say that he's going to shadow either Thielen or Justin Jefferson in this one. So with that being said, we don't really have the anticipation of a shadow coming for either of these guys, which means we're not going to recommend benching either of them, but do know that that is a possibility. This is an area of strength for the Packers defense, is their secondary, arguably their only real strength. Defensive line is all right as well, but that linebacker core is still pretty suspect, which is why you see a decent amount of points being scored on the ground. Now, that being said, I'm not going to be scared away from really playing any of the stars in this matchup. We've got, of course, Dalvin Cook. Looks like he's going to be back. Obviously monitor the injury report, but based on reports given today on Wednesday the 28th, Dalvin Cook is looking to be active and healthy coming back into this game. I have no trepidation starting him based on the fact that he had multiple weeks to recover from this groin injury that was never really considered that severe to begin with. I think he'll be perfectly healthy. I think he'll get a full workload, and I'm not really that concerned about re-injury. Of course, you should have Alexander Mattison rostered by this point. Yes, he did disappoint us the last time that they played, but that was kind of a unique game flow situation there where they started to get routed by the Falcons pretty quickly. I know Mattison definitely didn't give them the same kind of juice that we see out of Dalvin Cook, and maybe that was part of the reason why they fell into that game script so quickly, but you can't expect that to happen every week. Mattison, definitely an okay flex start in a deeper situation. We did see him put up a decent performance against the Packers in Week 1, but not someone I'm going out of my way to start. As I mentioned in the lead-in, I think Thielen and Jefferson are still both good plays. Hopefully we don't see a full game shadow from Jair Alexander on either of these guys. If we knew for a fact that he was going to be shadowing one, I would definitely be a bit more hesitant to start them. We didn't see a full shadow in Week 1. Adam Thielen obviously went off in that week, and Jefferson was still getting his footing, so he didn't really have a good game Week 1, but that was more so just him getting used to the offense. So at this point, I'm still pretty comfortable starting both of these guys and praying that Jair bounces back and forth between the two of them. Kirk Cousins shouldn't be someone you have to be relying on at this point. Obviously has had a bit of a problem with throwing interceptions up to this point. Depending on your league, some leagues have interceptions penalized a bit more. So know your league settings for this one. I do think Cousins will have a decent day in terms of yardage, but not as excited about him as some of the other options that are probably on waivers this week. Now, the real question is, can you trust any of the tight ends here? I do note that the Packers have been pretty decent at slowing down tight ends up to this point. Irv Smith would be the play here if you needed to throw a tight end out there. Last time we saw him, he had 4 catches for about 50 yards, I believe, which is an okay day for a tight end. He's starting to see a snap share go up over the past 2 weeks that the Vikings played. So if we're looking for a stash option, I do think Irv Smith is a decent stash, but I don't really want to play him against the Packers here. Maybe he ends up getting a bit more involved than we're expecting, but I'm really just looking at the 3 core guys here. On the Packers side, this is pretty easy for me. Aaron Rodgers is a fantastic start. He's been great with the exception of the game against the Buccaneers. He's been one of the better fantasy options all year. Now, the question here is, will you start Aaron Jones or Jamaal Williams? Well, that one's going to be pretty easy as well. The Packers front office or their medical team rather, is pretty conservative, as we've seen, with Davante Adams and now with Aaron Jones. Even when the player feels like they're ready to go, if the medical team has any concern whatsoever that their injury might, turn into something where they can re-injure it and make it linger longer, they will hold them out. So at this point, Aaron Jones is definitely in question for the Week 8 game versus the Vikings. Do not be surprised if he sits out one more week, healing this calf strain up. If he plays, I have no problem starting him, as I mentioned, with the conservative medical staff there for the Packers. If he plays, I believe he's 100% healthy. If he doesn't, then obviously they believe that there was a chance for him to re-injure it. So they're doing the work for us. I honestly wish that more teams would be like the Packers in that regard, because it would make things a hell of a lot easier for us in fantasy purposes, because then we wouldn't ever have to worry about, are we starting someone that's going to end up being gimpy or being a decoy? Like we know with the Packers, if a guy is starting, they're healthy enough to play. The only thing we worry about then is if there's an injury in the game, but no one can predict that. So for me, if Aaron Jones is playing, I'm playing him with full confidence. If he's out, I'm playing Jamaal Williams with full confidence. If Aaron Jones is playing, do I still play Jamaal Williams? Probably not. Maybe he makes an okay flex option, but pretty much in the same spot there as Alexander Mattison, only doing it if I'm in a desperate situation due to buys or injuries. Davante Adams, if you need me to tell you to start Davante Adams at this point, you're crazy, dog. This is a defense to exploit, and we already saw Davante Adams go off for over 40 points the last time we played the Vikings. Fire him up again. I think Robert Tonyan is a good play in this one, and I think he can play the Packers defense, as I mentioned as well, with Kirk Cousins having a bit of a problem with interceptions and fumbles this year. Looks like the Packers defense could be one of the stronger plays on the week, even if this is a higher scoring game. A.J. Dillon sucks. If you still have him on your roster, you need to drop him. Probably do the same thing with Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Darius Shepard should be the wide receiver 2 here, but he's probably not going to see too much work. Alan Lazard was back on the practice field today. Doesn't look like he'll be active for another week or so, but he'll end up being the wide receiver 2 when he is back. I have the Packers winning this one 41-24. I don't think this will be too much of a competition, and I think this will be a good day for fantasy for your main guys for both of these teams.